Hi, I'm Tim. I'm going to talk a little bit about viscosity and the importance of viscosity inside of an engine. As we all know, viscosity is the thickness of an oil. In front of me I have a couple of different samples of viscosity. This is water. As you're all familiar, the viscosity of water is relatively light. These are some other base oils ranging from thinner all the way up to thicker. This is bright stock, very thick, so you can see the difference in viscosity. How does viscosity relate to an engine oil's performance inside of the engine? There's actually three different areas that we need to be concerned about. We need to be concerned about the flow of the oil inside of the engine. That's one thing I'll show you. The other is in terms of how it protects the metal parts inside of an engine. That'll also be part of the demonstration. And thirdly, how much energy is actually required to move the oil within inside the engine. Let me demonstrate what I'm talking about at this point. I will start with the lowest viscosity oil that I have right here. It's relatively light. You can see it's not much different than the water that I showed you before. I'm going to take a drop of that, several drops, and put it on this metal plate. And first we'll demonstrate how it flows. You can see that it flows very quickly. And what is the importance of that? Well, when you have an engine that's been sitting outside when it's really cold, you need to have the oil flow very quickly within inside the engine, so that it pumps properly and also gets to the other parts of the engine that need protection. So you can see a low viscosity base oil provides some very quick flow. Now let's talk about protection. I'm going to put this other metal plate next to it, and we're going to simulate metal-to-metal contact or metal-to-metal surfaces within inside the engine. I'll put them on, and I'll start rubbing them together. You can see that they move relatively easily. The flow is very, very easy. And there is a very small amount of metal-to-metal contact that's going on here. So the protection may be a little bit lighter than what we would want. And in this case, we would have to add certain additives to protect the metal surfaces. So you can see that the flow is very good. The metal-to-metal protection is somewhat okay, but would need to be augmented with additives. And the other thing is the energy that's involved in making these pieces move. With my hands, I can move these very, very quickly. So the energy level to get pieces to move with inside the engine is relatively small. To contrast that, I'm going to show you next a very thick base oil. This happens to be bright stock. With this particular sample, already with the flow, you can see it's difficult. I'm having a hard time getting the oil to come up into the dropper. I will now demonstrate the flow of a thick base oil. And again, think about how this relates to the engine. As you can see, it's coming out of the dropper very slow, so the flow is very slow. In a cold engine, this would not be an ideal situation. It would be very difficult to get the oil to flow to the pump and through the rest of the motor. Now you can see I can hang this just about in any position that I want, and it's not moving. The flow is very, very slow. So we know that flow is a little bit less than it was with the thinner base oil. In terms of protection, I will now take again the other plate and bring it in contact and start moving it. And immediately I can feel that oil between the metal plates is giving great protection. I feel absolutely no metal-to-metal contact in this situation. So the protection of the metal surfaces is much higher. However, there is a little bit of a penalty involved with that, in that as I try to move these plates around with my hand, it's very difficult. It's taking me a lot more energy to be able to do that. And the upshot of that is if you have a higher viscosity base oil, you're going to need more gasoline inside your engine to burn to get the parts to move. So in other words, it takes more energy to get those parts to move around with a higher viscosity base oil. So you can see the trade-off between flow, protection, and the energy required to get the oils to move within inside your car. That's the importance of viscosity inside of your engine.